Well, good evening, everyone. I am just coming to you live here now. We're just getting ready to set up for just tonight's chat on Councillor's Corner. I'm just going to bring in Councillor Killen. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Hello there.
Hello. Awesome. So I don't know if you can see on your side, Councillor Killen, the comments bar. Can you see that up near the top? You should be able to click the comments in the dashboard, and then we can both kind of see what's coming in. I can see it on my end, so if you get a chance to find it,
Yeah,
you
I'll
might
see what I can do here.
you might see it, but I'm actually, maybe you can see it, but yeah, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming tonight. We have been meaning to do this for a while, but as you know, there's been a number of things happening around town that has taken our attention off some of this public engagement. I know when I ran and when there was a lot more engagement at the level of the campaign, it was, we said we want to keep doing things like this. We want to keep talking to the public in the places where people are at, on the different platforms. So tonight we can see different comments coming in from YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, wherever you're streaming in, and we'll try to monitor those. And what we wanted to get into tonight was just an overview of civic engagement, right? Our city is only served well when we are all engaged in some capacity. We can't be engaged on all the ways, but at least overall, and then having the opportunities where councillors like us can come to you and try to provide some of those engagement opportunities as well is important. So, but yeah, so Joe, how are you doing tonight? What's good in your world?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's great that it's well timed, I guess, that we're having this discussion tonight. I just literally moments ago got off the St. John Pride meeting where they elected an entirely new board and actually grew their membership by a very, very significant amount. Some people may have been following this story for quite a while, and tonight was kind of a final resolution to it. Where we have 5 new wonderful members on this. Has a lot to do with the introduction of the queer community to the rest of St. John. So the legacy lives on, and a lot of people came together to make this vote happen tonight, and it's been resolved, and people will hear more. And it's really great to see and witness community groups take hold of something they really deeply care about and kind of do good work from there on out. So it's a good discussion to have, because we're just 11 people, you count the mayor around a horseshoe, who get things at a very high level. We don't necessarily know the user experience of every single person that lives and works in this city. So that's why it's important for us to get better at it, to get better at civic engagement, and to find more ways for people to get involved and do really good things that benefit the rest of the town, right? So
yeah, that's really good. So the new board, they'll be doing what they've been doing for how many years now? How
over 20 years has St. John Pride been around. So yeah, it's exciting to see things evolve, so that's one example. I think we're going to talk about some others and ways that we can get involved as well too.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately at the city level, there's so many different areas to be engaged with. I mean, we have our ABCCs, and for those of you who are watching tonight, again, welcome. Thanks for joining in. We have these associations, boards, committees, and they do all sorts of different tasks, right? They could be police commission, which I know you're on, could be transit commission, which of course I'm on, and there's at least there's dozens of others, but then there's all of our community groups, and those community groups pay attention, and they are kind of some of our best information on the pulse of the community and what needs to be done. And I know for councillors, I certainly find that information invaluable. And another group we've seen really active that we've been obviously giving a round of applause to for a while now is Dominion Park.
Yes, West Side.
Yeah, which of course I'm on the west side too. It's funny.
Yes, for sure.
Being in this role of councillor at large, living on the west side, it's a bit strange, because it's like Yeah, the ward system's fun, but
Mhm.
yeah. So Dominion
Yeah.
Parks, that's an amazing inspiration of a group that's been very
Hugely
active.
community led, like they work together as a communities who all live in and around Dominion Park or have some connection to it, and decided to kind of forge ahead and say, this is where we think this park design should go, what it should look like. Obviously that piece of property is the city's, but that doesn't mean that the people that who frequent it or care about it the most can't lead initiatives to make it better.
Right.
Which was something really cool when I came onto council and realized that with a little blood, sweat, and tears and organizational know-how, there's lots of opportunities to work with the city of St. John to community build and to create spaces and place make and do really cool projects, and I'm witnessing them, you need like a finance guy and like a planner, a strategic person, etc. But often there are those folks in the community that have those skills that align with the things that we want to do. So bringing them all together is kind of the magic that can happen in these situations.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just take a sec here just to make sure we shared everything. I'm just checking here. We've got about 6 or 7 of you watching, and so we want to get into some interesting issues here tonight for sure, just on this topic of civic engagement. But I'm just going to share this on my personal page, and I'm just going to check and make sure here that we're streaming. Hey Ryan, I see you. Thanks for chiming in tonight. And just want to make sure that everybody who's supposed to see this is going to see this.
Yeah, I can't see any comments or anything, so I think you may have to manage that side of things.
Yeah, I can definitely see the comments. No problem. Yeah, so we're live on Twitter and we're live on Facebook, and it looks like we've got around 9 or 10 people on Twitter, and I'll be looking for we'll be looking for questions and opportunities for that at the end. But wanted to get into this topic of civic engagement because it is a convoluted thing. There's, like we talked about, there's these ABCCs, they do their work, then there's our community groups, but then there's a lot of people in the community, and all you have to do is go click Facebook and type in St. John News Chasers, Loyal City News Chasers, any of these, and there is just a mountain of information out there about what's happening and how could the city do this or what's the deal with this thing. And so, like, we've talked about a couple examples of where civic engagement has worked well recently, where, groups like Dominion Park come together, they make an association, they get the issues into the forefront, and we try to do our best to, as a city, to engage and figure out where we fit, where they fit, and all those pieces. But so there's things that we can continue to point to tonight, but where has it gone wrong? It's I don't want to make it say like we don't want to shame anybody. We're not here to try to make anybody feel bad about it. But I think there's just a lot of misconceptions out there about what is City Hall, what is a city councillor, what do they do, what are the issues that we're fighting for and we're trying to figure out and solve. And then, the disconnect between the public that are feeling the issues and feeling the pain and feeling, we've obviously heard there's been a story going on right now in the city about Shauna Campbell and I guess Pi Campbell, and Amber Moore and a few others. There's been a paper piece about their home and the mold issue. And it's just, when you go into the comments, there's certainly, and people are just trying to figure out who to blame. Like, how could this happen? Like, what happens here? So I guess, like, what's been your experience so far? And maybe we'll get to mine later, but what's been your experience about civic engagement gone wrong?
Well, I mean, bringing up that situation, I feel that one of the biggest roles for us is to be navigators, because we have a bit of an inside track on how things work. And even then, let's just say it clearly, we do not know how everything works at all, like point blank. Like, there is so much to how a city has been built over 200 years, how systems have been designed over a significant amount of time. And it's very common that people get lost in those systems, right? So when you think about a house that has gotten to a point where it's very, dangerous and not healthy to live in, there's often been a whole bunch of missed points along the way where things haven't gone the way they should have. An inspection or an issue wasn't pointed out and corrected early enough, and somebody messed up in this whole journey of this house getting to where it is, right? And so for us, it's like, I always feel that we have to be the ones who can help unpack these situations and try and figure out, okay, well, what can we do now? Because we can't go back in time for sure. We can eventually look at that and see how things could have been done better in the past, but ultimately we need to be the ones that strategically ensure things don't happen like this again, right? So, and it's a lot of investigative work, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, I found that story and I just thought, okay, there's nothing we can do but the people who went in there and said they fixed the issues and didn't. But now we need to figure out how we can help these families. I mean, there's 8 kids involved. There's 4 families. There's, it's a big group of people, and we just still don't know exactly what's going to happen there. That's still working its way out. Obviously, we saw the article in the paper and things like that. But I know for my part, it's just like, okay, here's 2 families that have never had to use our systems before. And so many of these systems in our community and organizations and the things that are there to protect people and provide that security for housing and support. These people, in many cases, these families have never had to use them before. So they don't know how to use them. And some of them don't even fall under our jurisdiction. But we've had to become literate in them. So I've, for my part, been emailing people I know at, the rentalsmen, or, whether it be landlords or people in other organizations out there who have similar work. And I think that's our job. Would you agree? Like that's one of these things where people are like, well, what's a counselor's job? What do they have to do? Go to a couple meetings a week? It's like, no. There should be a lot more to it. And I mean, you can coast and you can do the bare minimum and just show up to our few meetings. But to me, I see this stuff and I see, like, if I have a few minutes in the day that I can send an email to figure it out. But I get the sense that you've been doing similar stuff on many of these topics.
I really find that I was having this conversation with one of the city staff, who was just explaining, because I'm always after them, right? Like, and I try to be very polite, obviously, and because I know that they're busy doing day-to-day things. But, unpacking this stuff for us, I think, leads to not just like helping that immediate situation. And this was the conversation I was having with one of the staffers, is like, no, it actually helps us identify a gap, and it helps us look to see if there's more people in that situation potentially. Sometimes, like with civic engagement, we only hear the ones that feel comfortable enough to speak the loudest.
Right.
And that is amazing. And that's what we want, right? But we also need more people to tell these stories and to explain to us what the real issues are. Because without that, what do we have, right?
I agree. Well, and I just think, to that point, there's a lot of people out there who are shouting about their issues. And they're out there and they really believe that their issue is the one that rules them all, right? Like the one ring to rule them. But there's 150 issues that we can hit with. And the hard part is figuring out what are the most acute issues. And then what is it that we can actually have some influence over? What is it that we can have influence over that can move quickly? What is it that we can have influence over as people? Doesn't matter like what our role, counselors, doesn't matter. That it's going to be slow moving. And I think it's the piece around civic engagement. It's like, do you understand the issues and the systems and the people involved enough to know what moves fast, what moves slow, why that's the case, what's in place around them, what resources they have to be able to do things on a dime or not. And I think the better we can understand that, the more we can say, okay, look, these are, and you've said it before, like, these are human beings in a situation on both sides. Some people being wronged or feel like they're being wronged. Some people who are trying to do their best to make an issue better. But it's like there just tends to be this disconnect with people about what's what.
Yes, I know. We are all humans. I keep trying, and we really should talk about this a little bit. We just did this blanket exercise with with the Indigenous community in and around, obviously the horrific sort of 600-year journey from first settling to now. But one of the bigger things that we all kind of came out of there believing, I think, is that, we're on the same team. Like
Mhm.
us as counselors, you as anybody here watching, as people who work for the city, as people who don't, we're all living in St. John. We all equally care about it in very, different ways. And so I think sometimes we have to like lay down our swords a little bit and lay down like the blame game and realize that oftentimes, excuse me, when it comes to doing things as humans, it's always going to be deeply flawed.
Right.
Like, it is just our nature, right? Like, we're all in this new century together. We're all figuring out technology. We're figuring out a lot of information that we're just learning for the first time.
Mhm.
And so when we're designing policies or strategies or anything like that, I think we all have to realize that ultimately there probably will be mistakes that are made, and we have to be okay with confronting them and moving through them and rectifying them.
Yeah, and I think it's also about making sure people understand the history here. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a staunch believer that we need more walkable cities, that we need
Really? I've
more,
never heard that
you
before.
never knew that, that we need to have options for mobility, for
Mhm.
safe transportation around the city, whether
Agreed.
you walk or bike or whether you're in a wheelchair or whatever. And I know that we have millions of dollars that we need
Mhm.
to put in to the infrastructure to make that better. But at the same time, we go back in time just 40 years and there's a lot missing, right? And so I think the history piece is important to remind people of, to say, look, I know we haven't solved this issue yet. We have made improvements.
Mhm.
And yes, we see that there's still some things that we've lost. Like, I know one of the things we've been talking about around the Transit Commission is um, this issue with people who have blindness and having access to transit, and making sure that the audio announcement of the stopping system, which is not in place, how problematic that is, and
Mhm.
how, and there's reasons for it, right? The city had it and then it wasn't working and they couldn't get it fixed, and there's all kinds
Mhm.
of the software that they bought and the company behind the software, and the operator. Like, it's a hard problem to figure out. Well, we can't fix that in a dime, but
Mhm.
it's like, it's back on the board now. We know that has been a missing link. We
Yeah.
know that hasn't been helpful to people, but if we go back long enough, there's been times when we didn't have these transit systems, we didn't have wheelchair accessible buses, we didn't
Mhm.
have some of these opportunities. And so
Mhm.
I think reminding people of just a simple little history like that is like, look, we get it. We
Mhm.
want to empathize with you,
Yeah.
but we're moving toward a solution.
Absolutely. In so many different ways. Like, every time I feel we go to council, when we get these packets pretty much within a few hours of the same time the public does, right?
Hmm.
So we review it and you want to try and understand it and go through it. And what city staff are working on a day-to-day basis are just literally hundreds of files. So there's the people calling, and that's the day-to-day, but then there's all these big catalytic things, and then there's the things that aren't so catalytic, and
Hmm.
it's just a big spectrum of work that's being done. And so, you just imagine your own work life. And listen, I own a restaurant. Like, I make mistakes on the daily. So, and I always own up to them. And it is about that too. I think it's how you deal with making errors and making, judgment calls that maybe don't make sense 2 years later.
Mm.
St. John is in a hugely different place today than it was in 2019. And so we have a whole host of issues that we didn't even anticipate with the last council, right? So,
Yep.
like, affordable housing is a great example of that.
Mm.
We didn't necessarily anticipate that we would have that issue when we were pushing really, really hard for growth for the last, 20 years, and
Yep.
really wanting to grow our population. And now it's happening. And so we're experiencing some other challenges. So I think as the world continues to evolve, that's going to keep happening. And we just have to be ready and willing to deal with it.
Hmm. Yeah. It's a good point.
Yeah. Do you want to shift
Okay.
into question period time?
Yeah. We got a couple here. I do want to come back at some point in time and just ask you, like, what's the most exciting thing that you're looking forward to that's happening right now.
Ooh,
So I'll park that with you.
sounds
We can,
good. I'll
yeah.
think about it.
Okay. So Debbie McCormick's here. and Ryan Ackroyd's here, and we've got Margot Shepherd here, and about 7 or 8 others currently. So between the different platforms.
Nice.
So I'm just looking through some questions here. And here's Debbie. Okay, she's saying, you know, what, I'll just read a couple here. What is your opinion on ageism? Does it influence your decision making? And then with the inflation rising, older adults trying to remain in their homes, why no resolution on water rates? Last census, 1 in 4 over 65 as well, 1 in 5 below the poverty line. What is your voice on this population?
That's a great question, honestly. I think it speaks back to, you know, intersectional social justice, you know, like when we are caring for the people who are the most marginalized, our whole entire society is better off, right? Like, so when it comes to seniors, like I remember being a part of, it was a startup weekend, and the whole concept was, how can we innovate on sort of how we care for seniors? Because one of the things I've learned through my entrepreneurship years is all about human-centered design. So like when we look at how we care for seniors as a community, as a society, are their needs being met? So we always talk about like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And some of the things, Debbie, that you're pointing to there are absolutely like in line with that. And as city councilors, it's really difficult because we don't have that direct access to that community in some ways, but we do when it comes to transit, when it comes to our streets, when it comes to different things, right? And being able to subsidize certain things for certain populations. So I think it's a continuous conversation of like, how do we best serve those who are most sort of unserved in our community? And
so I'll just add this, like back to our point on like, where does civic engagement go wrong? I think civic engagement goes wrong when we don't have efforts in the public from advocates, like, you know, terrific advocates like Debbie, who, you know, continue to raise her voice about the importance of this issue, the specifics of what's gone wrong, who's been hurt, why it's not helpful, whatever, what the alternatives are, what the solutions are.
Yeah.
But where I would say like we need to have more engagement is we need to make sure that there is an understanding in the public for as many people as we can reach to say, look, do you remember back when COVID first happened and everybody was saying, oh my gosh, the injustice that we have done on our seniors by not ensuring good regulation and good funding and support to our old age individuals living in homes, or the government program, like the different structures that we have for people who are not able to age in place. The federal government announced a budget recently, and there wasn't one mention of it. The provincial government had 4 or 5 major outbreaks with dozens of deaths in retirement homes, in palliative care homes, you name it. And there wasn't much mention of it. And it's like, at some point in time, when it comes to an issue like ageism, we got to ask, who is it that bears the majority of the responsibility to ensure that our communities are properly resourced to provide solutions to seniors? And it is in our cities. Unfortunately, it's not our cities, because we have like minuscule levers that we can pull to provide, you know, above and beyond. We don't deal with hospitals. We don't deal with schools. We don't deal with healthcare systems. We don't deal with almost any of it except our roads, which of course have a part to play. But it's one of those things to say to people, look, what we needed to make sure was happening was that our MLAs knew that one of the issues that publicly we care about is the injustice that happened in that time of desperation, and how did we get here where we've run an election campaign, we've now got an NDP Liberal coalition at the federal level that are talking about these issues, we have a provincial budget that just came down the pipe, and we're still looking for the, you know, support for municipalities to make sure our road systems have, you know, built in, like you said, human-centered design rather than car-centered design. You know, whether our transit systems can receive that bilateral funding. Anyway, I'll be quiet for a sec, but that's just kind of That's kind of where I'm at with that.
It's true though. There's there's a lot of work to be done across all three governments, right? And it, unfortunately, it is like I was saying before. What was that saying? So you said something at the blanket ceremony. Say
Nothing for nothing for us without us.
Nothing for us without us. And I've been thinking about that a lot because I think that is a super important thing to consider as we are talking about any issue, right? Like we have to do this together, and the more that we get together, the happier we'll be. Just that Rafi line came to me right there.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like, so like to as a even as a city councillor, right? Like I believe in certain issues that need to be advocated to other levels of government, and that's why we live in a democracy. That's why we are so lucky to live here and be able to do this kind of thing. And I think that's, one of the original purposes of wanting to come on here and talk about civic engagement, because, it is more than a Facebook comment, and it's even more than an email sometimes.
Yeah.
It really is about that. And this is what I witnessed tonight. And I don't know if many people heard my account of what happened at St. John Pride. A bunch of people were upset about something, and they got together and they organized and they changed it.
Yep.
So it's not just like, it isn't just us, because with nuanced issues like ageism, with senior care and health care and mental health, and all these things are very intersectional, which I think I said off the top of this is we have to look at all these intersections and figure out the best way forward. And oftentimes it's very been departmentalized or broken up across different governments, and maybe, hey, that could have been for a reason a long time ago,
right? But it centralizes things, right? And we see the danger of centralization. We put everything in charge. We put everybody in Fredericton in charge of the majority of these issues that impact our local communities. And it's like, you look at St. John, it's like, okay, you're municipal, but you have the same municipal rights as any city in Moncton or Fredericton, but St. John has specific issues that we don't get specific treatment on, right? We're Canada's oldest city, right? Aged infrastructure. We have 3 times as many lift stations for our water and sewage systems to have to move our water and sewage around the city because of our geography. We've got the largest exporter refinery that doesn't have its machinery taxed, and the city doesn't get to have a say in the tax exemptions applied to its mills or its industry in any sense. So we don't get this, we have a one size fits all approach from Fredericton really on a lot of these issues. And what we need is for somebody to stop and say, hey, look, you know what? Just because we're giving everybody the same size box doesn't mean everybody can still see over the fence. And there's that equity and equality piece where it's like, at some point in time, we have to talk about equity. And, to your point, Debbie, on ageism, and I just see another comment in there, sidewalk on Boar's Head Road is a public safety issue. We're $7 to $12 million any budget season from being properly financed and resourced to make those roads as adherent to our public safety recommendations, mind you. Those minimum codes that are in place are met, but the minimum codes never support everybody. We need to go above and beyond for specific issues, no question. We don't have a crosswalk at Reversing Falls. We don't have a Reversing Falls protected bike lane. We don't have a protected, crosswalk in a number of issues or a number of areas where the province has roadway systems that we aren't in charge of, and we can't. And so there's just so many issues that get back jammed here. And I think that's where it matters. Is it like it matters in provincial elections? It matters in federal elections that, I think I don't know, maybe you would agree with this. I don't know what your thoughts are. This is a good question. Around the issue of bilateral funding, I would say that our member of parliament, Wayne, has kind of gotten that message loud and clear. And we've seen the amount of funding opportunity for St. John to access increase over the past number of years. But on the provincial level, we're still disqualified for a lot.
Yeah, it's funny, that one. So just for anybody who's wondering what bilateral funding means, because we're
That's right.
actual nerds about this stuff. So that is when you often hear like, oh, okay, the federal government pitched in, let's say, a certain amount for Fundee Key, and then the province pitched in a certain amount for Fundy Key, and then the city pitches in a certain amount for Fundy Key. So that's very normal. That's how it is supposed to go. And that's, I don't know if it's like a hard and fast rule or if it's more like a decorum thing or how that kind of like shakes out actually officially. But it's very hard for us to get funding as a city if the province and feds don't agree to collaborate on that. And this comes down in multiple different ways, right? It's not just these big funding announcements. It can be very small projects and very big projects. And as, a new councillor, you're like, well, why wouldn't you sign on the dotted line about, money from the federal government? And what I've come to learn is that as provincial governments, they oftentimes make promises 5 years ago. So when your 5 year ago promise comes to fruition and you're looking at this other project and there's money from the federal government, it can kind of get missed or overlooked because they've already promised things before.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, right? So I would go in thinking like, I don't know why they're not doing that, et cetera, et cetera. And then you come to find out there is a reason that things are lined up this way. But I also come to find out that there's other provinces, I guess, like Manitoba was an example that I heard about that has strategically looked at that problem and gone, okay, let's like actually fix this for the future kind of thing. Like we're going to say that we're not even going to consider projects to go past a certain year date or whatever it is they decided. So they were able to look at that problem and not just go, oh, that's the way it always was. They looked at it and said, okay, now we're actually going to course correct and we're going to do that. And then we're going to get more money overall. So it's really interesting to me to actually get to the fundamental details of some of these issues that we see, because oftentimes it is something that's very minute that could be adjusted or augmented.
Yeah. And the bilateral funding piece is, it just continues. Like you look at it and you think, man, there's so much money left on the table and there's reasons for it. And what do you do about it? But I think it comes down to a philosophical piece, right? And that philosophical piece, I think as city councils that we're seeing is that we have outsourced so much to the provincial government. And, our constitution, section 92 of the constitution and 91, which break down those responsibilities between the province and the federal government. And it doesn't mention municipalities. And so in New Brunswick, we're kind of the last to really look at that. You mentioned Manitoba, they've got Winnipeg, which is their major city, it's their capital. And they have looked at the issue of their other municipalities and how can we support the municipalities situationally and uniquely rather than saying, hey, Brandon, Manitoba, you've got to play by the same rules as Winnipeg, even though Winnipeg has 7 times as much capacity. And so they support those municipalities appropriately so that there's that level of access. And that's important. And it trickles down to all issues, I think. We talk about cycling, so you talk about housing, right? There's so much money on the table for housing. We're the only province that doesn't have a minister. I shouldn't say the only province. We're one of the only province that has, the Ministry of Housing buried under social development. And every person needs to be concerned about shelter. It's not just people who are suffering from, being on disability, or they are impoverished, or they have lost their job recently. Or they're homeless. Like everybody needs to be concerned about shelter. Yeah. And we don't have a single minister that stands up and takes responsibility for shelter. We certainly have it for healthcare. But it is, I called for that back in July to say, look, can we at least put it on the radar that we have municipalities that want there to be a minister of, and at the time I was thinking urban affairs and housing, but there is a role we can play in advocacy. Yes. But at the end of the day, all we do a lot of the time, I don't know if you've had the same experience, but we look around at other provinces and we're like, oh my gosh, if only we had this thing or this separation or this unique minister that had a mandate to engage with us, on this. But
we could, these are the problems we can look at and try and fix going forward. I feel fortunate that I'm new to this because I get to see it from a lens that isn't from within. It is as someone who's rolling into this and going, okay, well, what if we did align our funding with the federal government.
Right.
Wouldn't that be so cool?
Yeah.
And so I really look at those things as opportunities versus like, oh wow, like everyone screwed up and it was so bad and da da da.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like I said, humans being humans, it was left that way because it was that way before and before that and before that. And you know, governments change often in New Brunswick. We love a good
Mm-hmm.
switcheroo.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is likely, you know, we're going to continue on that. And we've said this, I think, as me personally, as a councillor, like everyone who works at the city is going to be there way longer than me.
Mm-hmm.
So any change or thing that I do now, is something that may or may not continue, right? Like it's going to be subject to other Joannas going forward who may not have the same vision that I do for St. John or the vision that all of council has. So, you know, we're just trying to figure this out, and public input is so important. Like with this ride sharing bylaw that we just had, that Shape Your City app, I swear, is so good.
Yeah.
Because you can just go through and get deep diving into everyone's thoughts and feelings, and the participation in that was incredible. So I hope we like start to see like thousands of answers on there about different
well, I
things.
know as your chair of strategic planning, we had some good engagement there.
Yeah.
And it is a really good tool. It helps bring up the level of democracy and opportunity for people to engage. But I remember this quote that I found that I thought was really good. You know, you were talking about we're going to expire, right? And so, but what is the role? Like if our staff are going to be there forever, why the heck would we need a council? And so this is a question I often get asked. People don't know what we do. And I say to them, look, I wish I had a full-time job to be able to put it. I don't know if you feel this the same way. Like I love the tool library. I love what I do on that front.
Same.
But anytime I come to issues of council, I'm like, holy smokes. It's not all issues, but many. I'm like, I need to go away for 15 hours here and figure out what I don't know. And then I need to figure out what's working elsewhere. And then I need to figure out why it may or may not be applicable to the New Brunswick situation. And then I need to figure out what resources could potentially be utilized.
Oh my God.
It's like, you know, there's been, and I'm looking at I've got 7 Google Docs, but I found this quote, and I think it kind of sums up the issue. You know, what is our role? What it is that we can do, whether we have enough time to do it or not. But the function of politics is to set direction, making policy decisions while the function of politics is to set direction, making policy decisions, while the function of the administration is to carry out the policy, namely implementation. Right. And so for you and I and our other colleagues around the table setting, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're trying to capture the pulse of people and say, look, this policy here may have missed the mark, and we need to set something, a program, a strategy, you know, a policy, whatever it is, to try to change that direction because it's missing the mark.
Yep. And that's why we need to know what the gaps are. That's why we need you guys. Right. Like, it's true. Like, we can't necessarily fix your problem tomorrow. And, you know, the situation on the west side is very exactly it. It's identified an issue, right? That's beyond just this one, like this singular situation, right? And I've talked about this in the newspaper myself. Like I'm housing insecure, and I'm your city councillor, right? And so if I have all this wonderful privilege, and I have this role that guarantees me a certain amount of income every year, I always say the canary in the coal mine, right? Like if that is happening, like what are we not hearing? And so with our plea to you, I think tonight, is to say that, like, honestly, we are here to understand you better. And unfortunately, like the bandwidth that we have, or at least for me with this restaurant and being a parent and you're a parent, and, you know, we're all just trying to make it work here. Facebook's really hard to kind of like grasp the information. So I'm always like, here's my email, here's my phone number. I'm literally at Slocum and Ferris all the time at the market, and I have really good conversations with people there, because I think you do as well at the tool library.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's those chances and the getting people together to formalize your opinions has a lot of weight, right? And it has a lot of impact on us.
Yeah, and I think, like, before you fire off a lot of, hey, you need to do A, B, and C, and if you just did A, B, and C, you'd fix all my problems. Like, appreciate the fact that we've been asked, or we feel convicted about different things, or we've been asked by a dozen other people to look at A, B, and C and just fix A, B, and C. And like you say, that bandwidth piece is significant. The other cities, they have counselors that are paid in a way that basically mandates that their attention to their position be full time. I don't think you can be in a city of any size. Like, once you kind of cross that 70,000, 60,000 threshold for your population. And I mean, in our situation, we have a lot, like, there's cities much bigger than us that we would have far more going on in, with our port, with our rail system, with our airport. Like, there's not a lot of cities out there with 60,000 people that have an airport and have a port and have all this stuff. So there's a fair bit that we have to look at. But before you send off a message to us saying, just fix it and do A, because I know that the solution to it is A, come at it with a respect, I guess, and a bit of a consideration of us to say, look, I wonder what they see. I wonder if they see what I see, and what can I do to kind of have a dialogue rather than to have a, here's your grocery list, counselor. And that's hard. It's hard to deal with as a counselor, to be told by person A, B, C, D in a run of a week, I just need you to go and fix this, please, with not much of a chance for conversation.
Because oftentimes let's take a pothole, for instance. So you have your pothole and it's like out in front of your house, and this, that, and the other absolutely is a main source of frustration for you. And I literally completely understand that deeply, because I've been this person. Listen, like, I've had little tiny issues and I'm like, I can't believe this. What is your problem? Geez, like, get your act together kind of like reaction, right? Like, I will fully admit that I've had that before. And so, but then you take the guy who is up here and he is managing, in the camera up here, he's managing all the potholes in the whole city, that every taxpayer, I've heard this stat once, every taxpayer who pays property tax is responsible for 11 square kilometers of St. John's land mass. And that's one of the highest amounts in the country. So your one pothole that is very much the source of your daily frustration is one of thousands that are the source of the guy up here's daily frustration, right? And trying to manage how they are going to fix all of them, in this season, right? And then once again next season, and then once again next season. And so I don't envy, a lot of people to have this job to manage the sheer amount of issues that we have for having one of the biggest kind of by geography cities around in almost the whole country. Like, it's wild. So it's that patience element, it's that human understanding element that I think that we could do so much better, sort of having that sort of tone in our conversations with each other.
It's a good point. So I want to give a little shout out here to just a couple of comments that are coming through from people. We really appreciate the engagement, everybody being here. There's about a dozen people on here right now. There's been as many as 15, so it's great to see you all. So Margot Shepherd, she's an excellent counselor in Fredericton. Margot's here. She said this. She said, municipalities in New Brunswick need more authentic citizens like you on their councils. Thank you, Margot.
Thank you, Margot.
Thank you. Encourage your fellow activists to run in the next election. Activists are often demonized. They care, hence they try to improve things. And I think that's absolutely true. And what I would say as a housing activist, and I mean, you yourself, you're an activist on multiple fronts. I very much hung my hat on the housing issue, because I myself too, my family had the same issue. We were housing insecure, and we just realized the gaps are just unexplainable and I mean, they're not acceptable.
They're fixable though.
But they are fixable.
Yes.
And we're working on that.
Yeah.
But as an activist, I ran and I knew that, okay, there's other issues. So I try to educate myself on those other issues. But there's a lot of activists that continue to stay very narrow. And I don't know what your experience is. And I think this is a debate, right? Like, do we want activists who are so single-minded that they just come with the best information and the best data and the best recommendations on their one issue? Or do we need, and it kind of segues to my next point about, where do we need people to pay attention to? But like, do we need more well-rounded activists that are going to try to understand a broader, I guess, spectrum?
See, what I love about activism, though, is that principle can be applied on so many issues. So, like, I kind of entered into this space. I was a part of this. I'm going to say this. I was part of this Facebook group that has quite a significant amount of followers. I was one of the admins on it. It's called Slay the Patriarchy. So my big foray started with feminism, right? Like I realized, like, oh my gosh, like I grew up in like diet culture. I grew up in misogyny. I grew up thinking I had to be a certain way. I came out as queer, like all these things. So mine all started over identity crisis, right? Like, so that was more where I began. But what I realized was that taking what I learned from being able to advocate and, be a big part of that scene, I guess, through that, was that that is duplicatable. Like I can take that energy and I can transfer that to transit. I can transfer that to my work with the police commission. I can transfer that to like my growth committee work, because it's my heart and soul caring for others. That's the big thing. It's about caring about St. Johners getting a fair deal. It's about caring that people who are marginalized have what they need. And I don't think negatively about activism. And I love that Margot said that, because it's true. I felt like, oh, your opinion is like too much or too harsh or too this. So it really opens your eyes when you realize that energy is exactly what we need in this world to enact this kind of systems change and take things and look at them and fix them and mold them to something else. Like I think I keep talking about this quote I read about looking at all of the things we feel are wrong with our society as a giant cloth. And all of us are just out there pulling strings to dismantle it, right? And just trying to figure out how we can weave something new that truly encompasses and fits the needs of everybody here on this blessed planet.
Yeah, because
and my TED talk.
Thank you. We can go home now. That's wonderful. But yeah, because there's been so much inertia over the years, and so many, people 50 years ago thought something was the main thing, the most important thing, and my darn it, we're going to put in place the right governments and the right policies and the right protocols to make sure that this main thing is taken care of. Well, then the game changes, right? And then something happens, and then somebody's forgotten, and then somebody gets hurt, and or whatever it is, and we're not doing the right thing anymore. And that's the hard part. And that's where I think with the energy of activism, it's so important, because if you're a true activist, and I don't want to say true to be too purist here, but if you're a good activist, you're like, I need to understand the water in which I swim here. I get it that there's not enough lily pads for the frogs, but what's the ecosystem here with this water? Why is it not?
Why is it poisoned?
Right. Why?
Where's it coming from?
That's right. I think of, the tenets of community development that we learned. It's like most people, they have in their head, okay, well, if you give a fish to a person, you feed them for a day. When if you teach them to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. And they think that's where it stops. It's like, oh, well, obviously we need to teach people to fish. So it's all about education and advocacy and all that. But it's not. It's like, well, what happens when the pond's empty and there's no fish in the pond? Or what happens when a multicultural company has moved in and bought the rights to the pond and you're not allowed to fish in it anymore? And it's like, well, we need to stock the pond, and then we need to like try to rally the right systems to like empower the community around the pond to caretake for it and to look after it. And that's the indigenous lens, right? It's what we learned in that blanket ceremony about the lens that used to exist on our land that is so precious and so embodied in our indigenous brothers and sisters. That we just need to recover. And I think that's the activism tie in there, is to say, look, this is really what we need to recover, the the person-to-person stuff,
Yeah.
the making sure that we're not trying to throw somebody under the bus, but we're just trying to solve a problem.
Yes. Yes. If we can impart anything tonight, I would love it to be that, honestly. Like, I don't get there's no evil people around. Like, we're just literally regular humans trying
Yeah.
to figure out problems that exist. And like I said, St. John is very different than it was in 2019, in 2022. Like, and we have to be flexible and malleable enough to evolve with our community. It can't just stay stagnant.
Oh, sorry, I pushed that up there.
That's cool. I saw it for once.
I forgot I could do that. I was trying to scroll through my comments here and I clicked one by mistake and I forgot I can highlight them. Anyway.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to read all these later.
Yeah, there's power in this. A lot of them coming through Facebook. We're coming up on 51 minutes here. And I just wanted to double check here and make sure that I'm seeing anything that comes in on Twitter. Because last time I had an issue with not seeing what came in on Twitter, but looks like I am. So, where are we at here? Had a few comments. Oh, Jen Wilshadowoots. This is a good one. My favorite mottos lately are nothing for us without us, woo, and no wrong door.
Love that. No wrong door. Oh my gosh, Jen. Beautiful. That is perfect. Because I think that goes back to what we were saying before. Like, if you have an issue, like, we can be your navigators. Like, that is not a problem for us, I don't find. Like, so there is no wrong door to go through when it comes to this stuff.
That's awesome. I mean, back to the issue that we were talking about earlier with these families that are going through, they got this house, the property management company dropped the ball, they didn't look after the place properly, there's mold, kids are sick, it's devastating, it's just terrible to even consider. But they're having this issue, like, they've never needed this system before. And that's where the literacy for us comes in. We say, okay, look, how do we make us no wrong door as much as it's hard? And this is where the time piece comes in, because it's like, okay, I also have this 40-hour a week, 50-hour a week commitment over here. I also have kids. I also have a life. I also want to make sure that I'm being sensitive to my council responsibility. Like, all of it's there. Yeah. But it's like, my goodness, so many of the times people who have never had to need, especially in this time, people have never needed the system before, all of a sudden need it. And they have no clue how to operate it, because you call social development and then it's, well, you got to call the NB service and Brunswick to the rentalsman. And then, oh, it's not the rentalsman. You need to call the city inspectors. And then it's like, well, then fire prevention shows up and they're supposed to be there, but no, like there's just so many moving parts here. And that's where it's like, I don't know, it's taken me 8 months to at least become semi-literate. I don't know.
Oh, I'm the same way. Like, and I think one of the funny things is that one of the first things that you and I actually worked on way back when we first got elected was trying to find someone housing who had just lost housing. Right. And she had put on, assistance, et cetera. And like this whole situation, and we're there on the phone, like you're calling landlords, I'm calling HDC, and figuring out first steps and how that works, and just trying to do some of this navigational stuff. And it's because I need to know that. I need to know if a constituent comes to me and needs something like that I at least have the base level knowledge of like what that looks like. So it's very understandable that it's not easy for everyone to figure this out. So, that's a big thing I hope to become known for.
Yeah, I 100%. That was well said. Okay, so I got some more comments from Debbie, but I'm going to give our friend Nick Cameron a little highlight here. So this is a long one, because we got about 6 minutes left, and I still want to ask you what's the most exciting thing going on, and it's going to be hard to pick. But
Nick with the data, I love it.
With the data, Nick with the appropriate details. Yes. So here we go. Fredericton and Moncton have 124 people per road kilometer. In St. John, the number is 97. In other words, we have 25% fewer taxpayers to pay the cost of that infrastructure on and under the road. So that's sewer, that's drainage, that's asphalt, that's sidewalks, the whole shebang. I think we all get that growth is needed to address the issue, but what does sustainable growth look like in St. John? We need more SJ residents engaged in answering that question. Okay.
I agree.
Here we go. What is it like? What can we look to? We don't have a lot of time, but sustainable growth, smart growth, not trying to become the next Toronto or Halifax or whatever. We want to be our own good and sustainable city. What is it that you like? Have you seen as like key to that sustainable growth piece?
Well, I think to Nick's point, we need to start talking about it like that.
Oh, I lost you, Joe. Oh, hold on a sec here. We're gonna try to get Joe back here. That was terrible because she was right in the middle of a great saying. She was talking about something. I just want to make sure. Oh, there we go.
Here. It just,
we're back.
Sorry, it just
We're
crashed. I had such a, okay, so yes, we need to start, okay, to my what Nick said, we need to start talking about it as sustainable growth. And this is just literally was something we've been batting around quite a bit, actually, because like I keep reiterating, St. John is not St. John in 2019, it is St. John in 2022. And we're experiencing a significant challenge with housing. We're experiencing a significant challenge with, you know, getting development moving, et cetera, like in so many ways. There's a lot of really, really good things happening. But we need to understand like what our needs are. So this recent housing needs assessment, I thought was very helpful because it really does identify like what those goals have to be. And I don't think it's exponential growth. I really hate that. I hate that there is this like, we must do better quarter over quarter over quarter over quarter till the end of time. That is a huge trap in my opinion. So I think we need to look at like, okay, so where are we at when it comes to being able to service everybody in these neighborhoods? Do they have what they need surrounding them? Do they have access to appropriate, you know, groceries, hospital services, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more of a holistic view of St. John than I think we've considered in the past because we've always been desperate for that tax base, right? Yeah. And so as we work on the other side of it with tax reform and getting St. John what it deserves, I think we can hopefully count on the sustainable growth to happen with us not footing the bill for the things that are needed for this community.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, I put on my strategic hat piece here. And like one of the things I'm most proud at is on the book so far as a kind of a philosophical underpinning, if you will, of the strategic plan, which we have never had. We've never had a 10-year strat plan to say, look, in 10 years, we want to move from here to here holistically on all these issues, right? And to be honest, strategic governance in any form is not that new. It's only been a prevalent reality for municipalities really in the past 30 years. And so it's like, well, why weren't we doing that in the first place? It's like, well, no one really thought we needed to. It was really fly by the seat of your pants, be reactionary. Like if you study the history of politics, you'll know that municipalities for a long time didn't have those kind of capacities.
No.
But when I think about that strat plan, I think the walkability, right? The 15-minute city where we look at our neighborhoods and we say, look, St. John is so far ahead.
Built for the future.
Because we're an old city.
Yeah.
We're also a new city because we were built for a time when cars were not the main thing. And we've done a lot of damage to that because for a long time it looked like cars were supposed to be the main thing.
Lanes. How many more lanes?
I need more lanes. Just one more lane. Just gonna put one more lane here. Trust me. We just one more. Like that TikTok is so
exponential
real.
Growth. I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's for sustainable growth. It is about looking at the future and saying, what's going to happen? Well, we know the cost of transportation is going to go way up. We can't have everybody having an electric vehicle on the grid tomorrow and it work. It's not equipped to do so. And oil and gas is going to keep getting more expensive. I'm a prime example. I took a bus today, twice, to get where I needed to go. Couldn't afford my truck. Right? Like now that I'm not running a construction company, I can't really make enough money to justify that big expense.
Huge.
There's going to be more and more people like me in that category. So how are we building a city that doesn't require, you know, and doesn't need to support that? We need mixed neighborhoods. We need, you know, active transportation. We need regular transportation. We need recreation on site. We need the opportunity for you to access recreation in some form for exercise and mental health. You know, you need to be able to get around your city, access these things. And we have some of those things that are in place as our city being so old that we can go back to and say, thank God that's still there.
Yeah, it's true. I remember hearing a thing about Brooklyn and Manhattan and New York and stuff about people who like literally never leave their 9 blocks. Like there's no reason for them to ever go anywhere else but the 9 blocks around them. And that always struck me as something that was like really interesting when you look at a town like St. John.
Yeah.
But to your point, when you look at the uptown, you know, that's ostensibly possible, right?
Right. Well, even in like, and it's like even the Lower West Side,
Yep.
even
North End.
the North End, you know, even in parts of the East Side, where it's
Yep.
like if there was just if there was just 10 years of focused effort on trying to connect those dots and trying to like, you know, green some of that and make some good placemaking and make it a place where people were like, I don't really need to go over there. People always tease each other about on the West Side about not crossing the bridge.
Oh yeah, it's a whole thing.
But why not? Why should you have to cross the bridge? And like,
right.
you know, how do we look at the subdivisions, which are really just a, you know, an anomaly on the spectrum of city planning? You know, how do we look at those suburb areas in our city and those communities that, you know, unlike the Lower West Side, which has a lot of density and people living together, but how do we support them in that walkability and access and options and things like that? So that's the sustainable growth piece, I think, to me.
That's the big, it's the white whale to me, because I think things have changed so much, right? And now we're dealing with different after effects of this boom in St. John. So how do we keep people here? You know, because really, as things start to kind of get back to the new normal, we may not be as attractive as a city to some Torontonians as they might think in this very moment. So it's like, how do we kind of capture some of those folks that have come here? And that's another cool thing about the Pride meeting tonight. I keep going back to this. There was like 3 or 4 people from out of town who like applied to be on this board. And so how do we make sure that those who come here and want to live here, chose to live here, still feel included, excited, wanting to live here for years to come? So
yeah, it's good. Couple of little comments here I'll pick up on, and then we're gonna finish with our question because we're over an hour. So I wanna
shocking.
I know, shocking. We had a bunch to talk about. Okay, so where we are, Margot, back to our friend from Fredericton, Councillor Margot Shepherd, saying Barcelona has super blocks that promote 15-minute city. So exactly, it's, you know, the 15-minute city. And to your point, I think, is that Neil?
Yes.
Oh, that's funny. The life we live.
Parenting.
Yeah. But like these super blocks, it's like, ooh, imagine that. A city of millions and millions of people, much bigger than any city we have here in Canada, has figured out that you can't build a city to be this one centralized entity where your malls are here, your people live here, your industry is over there, and you know your cool little green spaces are over here. It's like
driving from corner to corner.
You can't do that. That's the one more lane. I just need one more lane. I just need, you know, we need faster highways. We need, you know, it's so it doesn't work. So that's it's a good point, Margot.
Love it.
And she said earlier about, you know, how she wishes Fredericton would learn about the dangers of sprawl. We certainly have learned the lesson of sprawl.
Yes, we should have. We're the aftermath, Margot.
Yeah, and then we have Brian SJ here saying Brent Todden describes it as either car dependency or development that is unable to support immediate local services. So it's absolutely right. You know, like how much does it cost us to service each lane kilometer? How many people do we have in that lane kilometer to pay for it? Right.
Yeah.
It always shocks people when they find out that a lot of urban centers support the roads that go to the rural communities in which I used to live. Right. Because, you know, I hate to say it, I love my friends on Graham and Ann, but there is not one chance that the tax money collected on Graham and Ann could pay for the services that support Graham and Ann. And I don't want it to, right?
No,
we need Graham and Ann to be connected, but we can't split that hair of saying, well, you should only get the services that you can pay for, because it's not equity.
That's not equity. Thank you.
It's not equity. And when it comes to what we look at in our city, it's like, hey, we have to do better at looking at what's equitable.
Well, because the value is unknown, right? Or the value is not in dollars and cents. The value of Graham and Ann is not dollars and cents. It's everything else about it, right? Like, so yeah, that's what people seem to get a bit mixed up on, is this ratepayer thought. But anyway, we could have 10,000 more of these lives. So,
Oh, we're going to. This
yeah.
is really good. Okay. So I won't say what's the most exciting thing, because that's going to pigeonhole us and we're going to get called out by the newspaper tomorrow for picking favorites. But what are you excited about that's happening right now in the city that wasn't happening, I don't know, 8 months ago, 10 months ago, before we got here?
Oh, that's okay. So I want to say it's this path we're on around like building bridges and figuring out things as a group. Like we've touched on this blanket ceremony a few times. And again, one of the biggest, most powerful takeaways for me was we are on this journey together as a city, as a staff, as a council, together. Like this is very much about all of us working together as a team. Yeah, sure. Not all teams agree all the time about things, right? And I think that we can leave room for that and have grace for it and be okay with it. And so I'm most looking forward to getting better at this and navigating things better for people too, right? Like it's all about honing my skills as your counselor to be better for you and to be better overall at governing this city, right? So I have a very vague answer.
Hey, okay. Well, I will
you go specific.
Okay, perfect. I'll go very specific. But I agree. Those are wonderful things that I didn't see necessarily in place at the outset of the new council. But the thing I'm most excited for is this movement around sorry, my tablet's moving around a bunch here. Sorry, everybody. But around our minimum compliance stuff. We had minimum compliance inspectors at that family's house very quickly, rapid response to a family in need to go in and say, yes, there's some problems here. We need to take this away and we need to do our due diligence on what's happening here. We have new programs that are coming down the pipes to support some of that revitalization work, some of that rehab, repair over demolished stuff. We know we needed to demolish a lot of buildings. I'm not trying to say that to throw anybody under the bus, but it's that I had to take today. But it's just really exciting to see these new attention put on, and it's because staff are doing their due diligence. They're saying, okay, the cost of building materials has skyrocketed. The availability of labor has plummeted. And we don't have enough people in the trades. We don't have enough, available resources to build new houses everywhere. So how do we renovate and rehab what we do well, or what we already have? And so, but we're all kind of looking at this, that's something we've been fighting for since 19. People have been fighting it for long before me. But it's one of those things that's really amazing and inspiring to see. Something I'm most excited about is that we have these programs now that exist around, being able to go in and repair a building to protect the asset that it is to the community until we get a new owner for it, or to clean up the property, more aggressively or actively, or to ensure that these compliances are kept. So anyway, that's kind of it for me.
That's exciting. I mean, if anyone's really excited to hear about all this stuff, like tune into Growth Committee. Like,
yes,
yeah, it's a good one.
You chair. That's
that's my what I chair, and it's like the fun one because we're just talking about like the initiative Brent just talked about. Like that's where you get the heads up about what we're gonna be hopefully approving or seeing with regards to growth. But I do think we have put our little stamp on that committee in some ways, in that we really do care about that sustainability piece. It isn't just about rubber stamping every single thing, just giving, real estate investors carte blanche to like go wild in St. John. Like we want to make sure that everything is right for here. We deserve sustainable growth. We deserve a place that everyone can call home. So we're always really, really having that lens on everything we look at there, and it eventually reaches council, and away we go.
100%. And I'll end it with this. We just saw another exciting one from somebody who's really connected to it, our chair of Transit Commission, Nick Cameron. We have a whole transit redesign that's going to be pretty cool.
Yes.
And it is, and it's extensive, and kudos to, Ian Fogan and his team there, as well as the commission who are bringing that together. I know you're working on some really amazing things with Chief Bruce on the police commission.
Yes.
So there's
Shout
all
out.
kinds of things we should be talking about, but I think, we picked ours. We don't want to say it's the only exciting thing. There's a lot of new exciting things.
There's so many things, and that's what, again, we have to say is, like, we touch so many different files, and so
Yeah.
when y'all are out there advocating for one thing over the other, etc., like, we want to hear about it, but know that there's competing interests always, and we're just trying to make sure that we do right by all the things that are happening at a lightning speed often.
Oof,
So
I know, especially when you get 40 emails in 1 week before a council meeting coming up. It's like, man, how do you handle all that?
yeah, so
It's going to take a few weeks to get back to everybody.
exactly, but
it happens.
we will get there. Joanna.Killen at stjohn.ca.
Same deal. Brent
Yep.
Brent.Harris at SJTL at stjohn.ca.
Yep.
The right
Not
email.
hard to find us, really.
Yep.
This is
cool.
great. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah,
great.
thanks for coming. This was a lot of fun. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We've had like 42 some people who are through at some point here tonight that I'm seeing on my end. So it's great, and we had a lot of good dialogue. We'll continue to do these, so just track along, and by all means follow. You got a councillor page on
Get a
Facebook?
councillor page, and if you want to see me be more spicy, go to my Instagram.
Ooh, okay.
There is way more memes and jokes and things on there than there is Facebook.
Fair enough. And if you want to see me more spicy, you go find me on Twitter, I guess. But yes, so we're on there. We're trying to keep involved and to keep in touch with you guys. So we'll chat soon. And thank you everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.